Hey everybody, Ray Pastore here. Hope you are doing good. Today we are going to talk about we're talking about esports today, my learning live session. So I just want to welcome y'all, and we are going to talk about toxic behavior in video games. I'm going to talk about how to deal with that toxic behavior. I also want to talk about video game addiction, and the final thing is violent behavior and video games. So those are some topics we're going to talk about today. So let's get started. Let's get at it and talk about everything. These are some of the topics that I'm actually covering in my current esports class that we are talking about this unit. So my students and I have been chatting about it and everything like that. And now we're going to finally get to talk about it. So let's start with toxic behavior. I actually had some questions about this today in my Discord server. We were talking about, having maybe like a mental health channel or something like that for our students as part of our Discord server. Should we have something like that? And I suggested, that's probably not appropriate for a Discord server about esports, but we should be talking about toxic behavior and how to deal with it. So, what is toxic behavior? Step one. Toxic behavior in video games is anything that is more than, banter with the other team. So, it's saying terms that you're not supposed to use, calling the other team names that are inappropriate, potentially offensive, saying things about the other team to intimidate them, just saying very highly inappropriate things. That's what toxic behavior is. Now, if you want to see some examples of toxic behavior, go to any political forum, like any news site that talks about politics, and look at all the comments, and you will see what toxic behavior is. There's a clear line between cheering on your team and telling the other team like, oh yes, goal, like we scored kind of thing, and calling the other team inappropriate names. So there's a clear line there, and we don't want to cross that line. So let's talk about it. Toxic behavior in video games is a problem. Why is it a problem? It's a problem because you're online talking to random people on the internet. It's not the games, it's the internet. People are very mighty. Keyboard warrior is a term, right? Same with people in their cars, like people road rage, that normally in real life wouldn't act like that. So we talk about this in video games because there's chat and people are communicating via, these headsets. They're sitting there talking to each other, or they're on the controller or the computer typing away, typing something, talking to the other person. So it's something we have to be concerned about, especially as you allow children on a video game. So how do we deal with toxicity? So one of the first things, I like to bring up a few points about toxic behavior in video games. The first thing is all people in life are going to encounter this. Whether you are using social media, whether you are talking to people on news forums and news sites where it's really bad, whether you're playing games, whatever you're doing on the internet, you're going to encounter random people. So one of the things I like to say is, would you rather learn how to learn and teach kids strategies to deal with this versus them trying to figure it out on their own and it potentially affecting them? Because it can affect you and hurt you. There are real emotions involved here. So I do like to, make people aware of that. So that's one of the reasons I talk about this in my classes, and I think it's really important at all levels of esports or video games to talk about toxic behavior. I think it's super important to talk about it at the middle school, high school, and college level. So let's chat a little bit about it. So let's talk about some rules. And I've created a full video on toxic behavior and how to deal with it, but I want to talk a little bit more about it here. So one of the first things I do, first of all, don't play with random people, play with friends. It's one of the easiest ways to avoid toxic behavior. If you're on an actual esports team, you are probably not going to encounter toxic behavior because you're going to be playing with people on your team and against other teams who are going to be learning how to deal with toxic behavior themselves and have a coach and everything. So you're not going to have to deal with it too much. So that's my first recommendation for parents and for other players. Talk to people you know, play with people you know. The next thing, when you get into a game, there's always a mute option. Automatically mute everyone, and then you don't have to hear or talk to them, and it's very simple. And I get people like that interaction, but there are people that are toxic. It's always going to occur, so the best thing you can do is just stay away from the beginning. And one of the things I've realized, one of the things I've really realized as I've read the research on being toxic and I play a significant amount of games, so I see it in games, is that people play on something they think will upset you or hurt you. So if you let someone know any piece of information about you, you're a man, you're a woman, you're tall, you're short, whatever it is, they will take that piece of information and try to use it against you. And I also find that genders have different kinds of interactions in games, which is really fascinating to me as well. So one of the things that I found is that women in games, so like men in games, they will be toxically nasty to me. So they will say some really harsh things to me as a man, especially when they find that out that I'm a male, assuming that they can figure out my gender. But if you're a girl, what I've found is that players are initially more nice to you, but it's very easy to get into this weird zone where people become inappropriate, and it's a different kind of appropriate. And so I find the genders are dealing with different kinds of toxic behavior online, but the strategies to deal with it are all very much the same. It's really just muting people and playing with people you know, and having a coach and a team and having a support system. It's really the best way to deal with it. But teaching students how to, and when they do encounter these behaviors, how to respond or not respond, how to step away, take a break, is really important for people. And I'm actually going to be doing doing an interview tomorrow with one of the coaches from Team Liquid who focuses on the mental state of game playing. And we're going to talk a little bit, or it's actually Friday, it's not tomorrow, it's in 2 days from now. We're going to talk a little bit about that with him and how he deals with some of that stuff and teaches his professional players how to deal with that. So it's a pretty interesting topic. And, you know, it's something that's very real in games and something that's very serious that we need to teach people how to handle and encounter. And learning how to handle and encounter this helps you in all other walks of life. You learn how to deal with it in the boardroom, the classroom, wherever it is, with your family. In all walks of life, you learn how to deal with toxic behavior. So learning about it in esports is awesome. And one of the things that I find very interesting is that a lot of people in esports aren't necessarily people who were big into sports. So they never had that team aspect and got to learn that from being on a team and coaching when they were younger. So they learn it in esports. So it's a super important skill to have and something that I really like to focus on. And I think is one of the great things that we cover in esports programs with our students. All right, so toxic behavior. Next thing I wanted to talk about is, let's see, I want to talk about violent behavior, video game addiction. Let's talk about video game addiction. So, video game addiction. So how many of you have ever seen Beauty and the Beast cartoon? Beauty and the Beast cartoon. So, in the beginning of Beauty and the Beast, Disney movie, classic, right? Belle is walking through the town holding a book, and she's singing and walking a book. It's the first scene of the film. And the song that she's singing, but so are all the people in the town. And one of the things they're saying is, why is this girl wasting her time reading a book? She could be, you know, a farmer or married or whatever. She could be doing anything else with her life, and she's wasting her time. She's in this crazy book thing. And it's just, you know, an innocent movie in Disney. But the reality of it is we actually used to think that reading was a problem. It was going to be the downfall of society. In the late 1700s, early 1800s, when books for fun, fiction books, nonfiction and stuff were written, we thought they were going to be the downfall of society. And we would discourage people from reading. We thought that reading addiction was a real problem, that someone was going to read and neglect to provide for their family or do housework or whatever it was. We thought it was a very big problem. We've thought lots of things were going to be problems throughout the ages. We thought that radio, newspaper, television was a big one. Rock and roll music, it was going to be the downfall of society. Then it was computers, internet, social media. Now the focus is games. And I tell people, just wait until this sucker becomes commonplace everywhere. We're going to really be dealing with some addiction issues. And, you know, people who don't want to make these changes. So we've thought that things were going to be bad for us through all of time. The reality of it is none of this stuff is really any more addicting than anything else we encounter. The reality of it is, first of all, when someone is using something like video games or why they were reading a book, what is it about those things that makes them desirable? Why do we like that? It's because something's happening in our head when we read it or play it or whatever that's giving us a good feeling, so we like it. Now, having said that, that just means it's fun. The question of when does something become addictive versus not addictive, it becomes addictive when it starts actually interfering in your daily life. So if you're playing video games and it's not interfering with your life, that's awesome. You're doing it right. That's great. And just like anything else, you have to learn how to balance all of that out. And one of the things we teach in esports is, well, how much is too much? Because there is a too much. When you're playing a game, you're moving. Like the hands are moving, really annoying on the screen. You can't continuously move this fast and have a good reaction for 4 hours straight. It doesn't work like that. So we teach people how much is too much when you're actually doing yourself a disservice by playing too much. But the other part of this is there is a certain percentage of the population of people that have an addictive personality. Most of us know if we're one of those people. Like we get addicted to stuff like soda or whatever it is. We just happen to be one of those people that gets addicted to things. And if you are one of those people, there's a chance that you're going to get addicted to video games. There's also a chance you're going to get addicted to dieting or running. Or any kind of exercise is actually very addictive to people. So people will continuously run and get overworked and overtrained. There's all kinds of things that we actually do as humans that are very addictive to people with addictive personalities. And video games just happen to be one of a list of 1,000 things. You can be addicted to certain kinds of food. All kinds of things. So it's not that video games aren't addicting. The thing is they're just as addicting as all of these other things to people with addictive personalities. So that's where we have to teach people about responsible gameplay, what's too much, and things like that. So I just want you to remember that if you're thinking about or talking about, video game addiction and the role that it has on kids and how we need to play responsible. But it's all about responsibility. Too much water is bad for you. Too much of anything is bad for you. It's all about, and that's what I tell parents. Parents ask me all the time about how much should my kids play on a tablet? How much should my kids be doing this and that? And it's not like I want to tell a parent, well, kids should only be playing a video game for 20 minutes a day. They should only be on their tablet for 30 minutes. Well, maybe it's more about what is that kid like and what are they doing on that tablet or that game? When my kids were really younger, they were playing a lot of video games on the computer and tablet, but it was teaching them to read and teaching them math skills. So it was actually a great activity for them. And they were doing it as a treat. They didn't realize they were learning this stuff. Somebody just said hi in the chat. Hey, how you doing? So I like to bring up that it's all about the key to any of this technology, whether it's video games, tablets, is just moderation, understanding the child, understanding the person, understanding yourself, and knowing what is the right amount for you. And that's really the key to all of that. So yes, games can be addicting, but so can running and anything else. It's all about understanding yourself and moderation. So the next thing I want to talk about today, this is my third and final topic today actually, is video games and violent behavior. So I talked about toxic behavior, dealing with toxic behavior and toxic behavior in games. I talked about video game addiction, and now we're talking about violent behavior in video games. So, and someone just commented, you have to monitor that addictive behavior. Yes, it's everything I've been talking about here, that it's everything in moderation. There's a certain percentage of the population that is addicted to things, can be easily addicted to things, but it's going to be, if it's not games, it's going to be something else. It's all about learning to moderate yourself and being responsible. But let's get into, I want to get into video games and violent behavior, because it's another big topic that a lot of people are worried about. So first of all, when we talk about video games and violent behavior, we have to go back and we have to start to look at music and television, because there's a significant amount of research in those two industries about this topic. We've had many cases, court cases. We've had educational research on the topic. We studied so many different people, and figure this stuff out. So let's talk about what video games can and can't do. So overall, the research on this topic says that video games do not cause violent behavior. However, playing a game can change your emotions. So it can make you happy. It can make you sad. It can make you angry. It makes you all kinds of things. So you have to remember that video games can make you emotional. But the key point of that whole emotional part is that that emotion doesn't translate into your real life beyond the game. So that's where there's this difference. And if something is going to set someone to being angry, to them doing something terrible and violent behavior, it's not just going to be games. It might be them waking up in a bad day. Them not being able to find their car keys might be the thing that sets them off. Any little thing that happens or they would encounter in daily life will be the thing that sets them off. We have a significant amount of research on television and music and violent behavior that it does not cause people to go out and commit crimes, that it doesn't cause people to go out and do this crazy, horrendous acts. But what it does do is it does affect our emotions, and it can make you happy, it can make you sad, and it can make you angry. And there are those hormonal imbalances that happen. So it can affect you in that way, and it is something to think about and talk about. But it's not going to cause you to go out and do something terrible either. Can it put ideas in someone's head? That's really another question when you start talking about this. And someone just, commented that you have to think about things because it can change your attitude. And sure, there can be new ideas, but most of the violence in video games, and they also asked about the high amount of violence in video games. Most video game violence is extremely unrealistic. It's no different than a kid. I mean, we can say, is football too violent? You're literally tackling a person. Or wrestling. Is shooting a robot player any more or less violent than that? And it's a good question. Is it? Especially, so what we've done when we start talking about video game ratings and violence is we talk about there's a difference between a game with a squirt gun and a game where someone's shooting a realistic weapon. So, and I think that most people would agree that that's the same thing with children, right? Most people would give their kids a squirt gun, and the kids have a squirt gun war. My pool is a community pool in my neighborhood, and the kids have squirt guns all year round there. They're squirting each other in the pool. Pretty harmless. But none of them have a realistic looking squirt gun weapon that they're like shooting each other with. And there's a difference there. So what is the realism like? So a majority of games do not have that realistic element. However, having said that, there are games that do, and there are games that allow you to act out violent fantasies or just violent acts. A big one being Grand Theft Auto, probably the biggest one. People can say games like Call of Duty are violent, and they are to an extent, and it looks realistic, and there's weapons, but the army uses it as a recruiting tool. Like, it's actually pretty mediocre. But games like Grand Theft Auto are not. There's a lot of crazy violent things that can happen in the game. So if there are these many millions of people playing Grand Theft Auto, do they go out and act on those violent behaviors they're learning in the game is the real question. And the research is showing that they're not. I mean, I played the Grand Theft Auto series. I don't play it anymore. It's just not a game that interests me, that's all. And it never caused me to think like I'm going to go and do something like crazy like I was doing in the game. Because it was so out there and unrealistic of the things you could do in the game that, like, I never had a bazooka to go blow up a car or something crazy like, almost so unrealistic that it wasn't something that people were really going to want to do. But when parents ask me about video games and ratings and should my child play this and is this too violent for my child, my response to them is I do a couple things when I am, and I've done videos about this before, standalone videos where I've talked about my rules for video game play for my own children. So the first thing I do when my kids want to play a new game is they they have to ask me to play a new game. They can't download anything without a passcode, right? My kids are 10, 7, and 5 now. No, 10, yeah, 10, 7, 5. They keep having birthdays, so I can't remember how old my children are. And basically what I like to do is I like to find out, what is the game? What's it called? The first thing I do is I look at the age. There's an age on all the games and the apps and everything. And I look at that. And then what else I do is I just read a little bit about the game. Look at the stars, the ratings, and stuff like that. The other thing that I want to do is I want to research it. And it reminded me of kids when my kids just came in. He's putting the Switch back on its charger. Okay, go ahead. You can go and shut the door. So I look at the game, I research the game. A quick Google search will tell you so much about it. So quick. And this is how I can eliminate games if I'm just doing something like that. Other things that I might do, if I'm still questioning the game, if it's appropriate or not. You know, the game has screenshots. I might watch a quick YouTube video. If all else fails, I will go ahead and I will just play the game a little bit. And I'll see if it's good. I'll play it for 15 minutes, I can tell. I was playing this one game one time. My kids wanted to play. I couldn't really get a good read on it, so I started the game. As soon as I started the game, it was talking about, like, violent prison breakout. And I was like, okay, this isn't for you guys. They were, like, 7 at the time. I was like, no, not for you. Then when my 9-year, when he turned 9, he was one of the only kids in his class not allowed to play Fortnite, and he wanted to. So I said, you can play it. I'll let you play it for 30 minutes a week, and you have to play it with me. So I would play it with him, too, so that we could talk about anything that happened in the game. And he handled it really well, so that I knew he was ready to start playing it by himself. So things like that. And the other biggest whole component of this, how mature is your child? Are they ready to play something like this? It's not about age. The age is just this arbitrary value. It's not like the difference between an 11 and a 12-year-old when a kid's 11 years old in 364 days and all of a sudden that day they turn 12, like something magical happens. It's an arbitrary number. Like, you have to understand your child and know, are they ready to play this? I've known 10-year-olds that are ready for Fortnite and Call of Duty and stuff, and 10-year-olds that aren't, because my kid's 10 right now and I can tell based on his classmates, like, who is and who's not ready for stuff like this. And I tell parents it's about you knowing your kid, but it does fall on the parents, and it is responsibility for them, and an extra step that parents need to take. And yes, it's something you have to do, and yes, kids want to do it. So just be mindful of it and pay attention. For the most part, I mean, I'll be honest with you, it takes me 30 seconds to find out if a game is inappropriate. I can usually tell right away. Like, it's the rating, the pictures, the description. I can tell in 1 second if this is not good for my kids. Sometimes when it's more questionable, and that's rare. The other thing is I know a lot of games, so a lot of times if it's a popular one, I can say yes, no, that kind of thing, and understand, you know, if it's good for them or not. But those are the things you got to do. And, you know, that's it for this video. Those are the things I wanted to talk about. If there are any questions, I can answer them. You know, and always post in comments anything, and I can always come back and answer it. But, you know, it's really important to pay attention to toxicity in video games. And the key to all of this stuff is learning about it so you understand how to recognize it and deal with it. Toxicity, video game addiction, video game violence. 3 really important topics that, you know, are really being talked about a lot now. And sometimes I see the people really bringing a negative light on them. But, you know, we talk about, like, I mean, it just sometimes just baffles my mind. You know, we talk about this toxic, where these kids are going to be exposed to this, and where do these kids learn it? And it's like, they're learning it from going and watching adults in a political forum say the meanest things in the world to each other. The parents and grandparents are in these forums saying it. That's where they learn it from. That's where they see it. So if a kid doesn't play video games, is it okay for them to watch the news? Because they're going to see the craziest things on it. So, you know, just paying attention to that kind of stuff is super important. And yeah, that's it for today. So that's all I wanted to talk about. I've got some cool stuff coming up. I got a new show coming on tomorrow, so you should definitely watch that. It'll be, I don't know, maybe like 4 p.m. Eastern time, maybe 4:15 p.m. Eastern time, something like that. But it's a cool show. I'm going to try to start doing it every week, but it's with other people, not just me. So I think that'll be kind of neat and fun. And yeah, that's it for today. So later on, I might actually come on and do like a short reflection video a little later and talk about stuff happening in my life. But this is learning show, so we're going to focus on that only. But anyway, y'all, have a good day. Later.